Welcome to Private Politics, where we prepare you for your next political conversation. I'm Jeronimo Cortina.
I'm Brandon Rottinghaus, political science professor, just like Jeronimo at the University of Houston. This is our last show before the election. Yikes. A lot going on. Obviously, everyone's talking about politics. We want to make sure you've got some nuggets to be able to share and talk about with your neighbors and friends who are having Halloween parties, who are going to have election parties. There's a lot that is at stake in this election, obviously. Let's start kind of generally speaking at the top and look at turnout, especially Texas. We are in the middle of early voting, right? We're recording midweek in the second week of early voting, so things can change. But obviously, we got a sense of kind of where the vote is. To me, early voting has got a bit of a Republican flavor. The numbers aren't great from these big urban areas. It's like the Grand Canyon. It's high, but flat.
Right.
Compared to 2020, the numbers aren't outpacing where they were. That's not surprising. 2020 was a big year, but it's still the case that Democrats need that boost from the urban triangle.
Sure. And also the fact that these urban centers have incorporated more people. In terms of population, it has grown. And so your denominator has grown again. So in terms of real, actual votes, it's up. Not what you would be expecting if you want to be comfortable. We still have a couple of days. We still have election day. And that's where we're going to see the real battle royale really exploding.
That's a great point. Actually, Democrats are really now looking at election day. It's funny because a lot of scholarship suggests that minimizing election day by having early voting actually minimizes the chance that you're going to have more turnout. And so not having election day as that big motivator in some ways actually minimizes turnout overall. A lot of our colleagues study this very issue. But in this case, we're probably going to see about 3/4 of Texas early vote. That means election day won't have as many, but it's still critical for Democrats.
Oh, absolutely.
They're going to probably have to make up some ground, and it, of course, will be a high turnout election. It's a presidential. That's not in question. But really, it's a question about who's turning out. There are two factors I wanted to mention that make it a challenge for the Democrats, and that is, number one, the gender gap. In the 2020 cycle, you had a much more favorable split in terms of gender for Democrats. You had about 55% female turnout. The early voting numbers here are more like about 51%. So it's a small difference, but it's going to be a small difference in this election. The other is the young vote. You see a higher percentage of older voters at this point.
Correct.
Now, of course, that again can change once election day comes, but you see a lot more older voters than younger voters. Democrats are hoping for those younger voters to come out because that's a natural part of their constituency, but that's the name of the game. It's all about turnout.
Absolutely. And especially the issue with younger voters is that over the years has grown, but it has grown at a glacial pace. And that is, yes, indeed, a very important problem. And it's remarkable because not only has or could have important implications, but also has implications for our democratic system. Democracy is a game where everyone should participate. And the fact that some groups are abdicating that right is extremely worrying in the sense of you need to participate.
Gotta get
whether
out there.
you vote for one side or the other. What the final end game is turnout. And that's a good measure of a healthy democratic system.
Yeah, in 2022, like fully 9.5 million Texans didn't vote when they could. And that number cannot be repeated. Obviously, that's a midterm, so we don't want to see that again, but that's the real fear for Democrats. And the numbers are good. Like, I don't want to say that that's not what's happening. But let's shift gears and talk big picture about what the Trump campaign and Harris campaign are doing. Let's first talk about Donald Trump's closing arguments. He kind of had two. One was like PG, maybe PG-13, and the other was rated R. Watching the Texans game this last weekend, we saw like the big, bold 2-minute Trump ad, which are extremely expensive to run. It was well done. And it hit really the themes that he wanted, right? Talking about immigration, talking about the economy, really demonstrating that like things were better under Donald Trump and will be better again under Donald Trump. The cleanest argument I think we've seen. So everyone cheered. And then they went to New York, Madison Square Garden for a 7-hour rally that was ranging in the quality, quantity, and frankly, taste.
Yeah.
Where a lot of things happened. We won't tick them all off, but basically the rage fest included lots of discussion about massive deportation programs, discussions about immigrant invasion. One rage comedian called the Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. A former congressional candidate who is friends with Donald Trump called Harris the Antichrist. So, the greatest hits.
Yeah, the greatest hits.
So, like I said, kind of a tale of two closings. What do you think is going to be the thing people remember, or did none of it matter?
Well, I think we're in a position right now where if you're going to vote for Trump, you're going to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
Whatever he says or doesn't say.
Matter.
It doesn't really matter.
That was my take too, especially on the Puerto Rico stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we heard in NPR in Allentown, they had a Republican rally. President Trump was there, and Republicans were saying, and Puerto Ricans were saying, yeah, he's human. He makes so. If you're gonna vote for Trump, you're gonna vote for Trump, whatever he says. So
the mayor of Keller here in Texas was of Puerto Rican descent and said, doesn't bother me, and so. Maybe it won't. I mean, about 4% of people in Pennsylvania are of Puerto Rican descent. No effect. They are already committed.
There's going to be an effect.
Okay.
Because if you're going to vote for Trump, there's no effect.
Yeah.
If you're not going to vote for Trump, either because you're independent, you're undecided, or you're a Democrat, that is going to have an impact.
Yeah.
So the big question is, which impact is going to be stronger? So I'm kind of neutralizing the effect on Republican voters because that's null effect.
Right.
But on independents, undecideds, and Democrats, that can have a negative effect and positive effect for Democrats.
Yeah, and the whole goal of the rally was to talk about, which is odd at this late game, right? Because it's really about mobilization. But they had a new policy objective. They were going to give tax cuts to home health caregivers, which are an increasingly important part of the way that we deliver health care in this country. And that got drowned out, right? No one even mentioned that. It's like paragraph 10 after all of the other things that like Stephen Miller said about America being for only Americans. So there's this kind of constant churn of just chaos that I think that Republicans are either used to or some cases like. But the issue here for me is that there's two different types of potential non-voters. One is that you might go and vote for Trump or Harris, right? You're going to vote no matter what. And then there are people who aren't sure they're going to vote. And a motivation from a candidate might actually be the last thing that they see, and they think, okay, this is really for me.
Right.
I don't know that you're seeing that as much from Trump, right? The fact that you've got this kind of rage, grievance-based politics means that those people really aren't going to be inspired to go vote. They have to really be mad about something. And maybe they are, but there's nothing really here that he indicated in the last sort of closing moment, which was sort of, this is why you should vote for me, other than just, I'm not Harris or I'm not Biden.
Well, I think that's absolutely 100% right for once.
Yeah, thank you. But it only took, how long we've been doing this show?
Yeah, it's just the election spirit.
Okay, the feeling of unity is strong.
So I think the Trump strategy is to get 100% sure that your base is going to go out and vote.
Yeah.
That's like super important.
Right. Which is a question mark, right? Because
it's a question mark.
A lot of young men won't vote. And they've got to have them.
Yes, but that's number one. And I think that the next step in terms of non-voters, undecided, independents, et cetera, they're just flipping a coin. And see, maybe. We don't need them all. You just need a couple of them, a couple of percentages here and there, and not here and there in 7 states. And the rest, you don't care about it. So it's flip a coin, but have your base, have that very well solidified, then flip a coin and let's see what happens.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes total sense, right? I mean, the scholarship on nasty politics and this kind of divisive language suggests that you see people who are outside of the system using it to try to say that they're going to disrupt the status quo. So Trump has been an expert at this, and despite the fact that he's being outspent on on every ad, right, on every state, is irrelevant because all eyes are on him, right? You just can't look away, and that's a big reason why he's able to kind of continue to be successful at this. Let's shift ground and talk about the Harris campaign. She delivered her closing arguments at the Ellipse in Washington, D.C. with the White House as a backdrop, American flags. Visualizing her in the office, I think, is a useful strategy because it gave the campaign a sense that if there are people who are still not convinced that a woman can be president or that a black woman can be president in particular, then this may be the kind of closing argument that they need. But you tell me what you think. Do you think this is like this is an effective strategy from a symbolic point of view?
I think symbolically it helps. The imagery was very powerful in the sense of very presidential. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And images are summarized in 1,000 words.
There you go.
As they say.
Did you make that up? That's good. I'm going to
it.
note that down here.
Perfect. But then I think the speech is a speech that, in my opinion, at this very late stage, needs to be a little bit more punchier.
Yeah.
And punchier in the sense of more aggressive. Inserting a little bit, yes, hope. Yes, of course, that's important. But a little bit of fear as well. In order to counterbalance what the Trump campaign is doing.
Interesting.
Because the Trump campaign is using fear, is using migrants, is using the economy, is using everything in their toolbox to entice this fear. If you don't vote for me, there's going to be chaos. And the way that the Harris campaign is doing it is doing it in a way that is similar, but is not clear enough.
Interesting.
They're using very fancy words, let's put it that way, in such a way that is not, no.
It's not blunt enough.
Exactly.
That's a great point, actually. And there is internal debate in the Harris camp about how to pursue this closing argument, right? And there were people who thought that they should do exactly what you're claiming, which is to say we should hit Trump as hard as we can on this. And they have been for the past month or so.
Right.
And then this is kind of the last transition point. She refers to it as sort of the transition and or difference between Donald Trump's, enemies list and her to-do list. So it's a way, I think, for her to kind of magnify two things. Number one, that like Trump is unfit for office, and number two, that she's going to be really in your camp. She's going to be in your favor. So maybe that's the difference. Maybe that's the kind of compromise. But I have a feeling that you're right, that people want to see that kind of last minute, like, what are we really doing here? And maybe it makes her closing argument look naive compared to his, right?
Yeah,
He's saying there's an invasion, the country's going to hell, and like this is a terrible time for the economy. Everyone's suffering. And then she says, well, let's just look at my to-do list, right? Which is all about you. Some of which will help, but not all of which will solve like whatever problems he's talking about. And he's probably exaggerating these, but it's still the case that people may feel the kind of stakes are much higher than what she's allowing.
Right. I just put it in simpler terms, right? When you think about, for example, gas, the price of gas.
Yeah.
Price of gas has been decreasing.
Yeah.
Inflation, we're going to be in the next report about 2.1, 2.2%, the target of the Fed.
Yeah.
So
market's up and
a
unemployment's down.
counter-argument is they're telling you about inflation.
Yeah.
How much are you paying at the gas pump?
Yeah.
I mean, a simple question, very blunt, without institutions are at risk of collapsing on our values of democratic representative principles of these.
Wow.
Wait, what?
Yeah, now I'm scared.
What are you talking about?
Right.
I don't even know what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a great point. No, and I think you're right. And she's got a lot of money to back that, right?
Yeah.
$100 million they've spent in broadcast ads in the closing weeks.
Yep.
That's a tremendous push, and you have to think it's going to make some material difference. Although people are probably a little bit, kind of like done with ads.
Oh, absolutely.
The same as we're done with text messaging. Right? Like, we'd
messages.
love for this to be finished, but obviously we're going to have to kind of slog through this for a little bit longer. But I do think that's the issue for them. And honestly, for her, she's got to get that coalition to come out. And that's the most challenging thing. Barack Obama makes a similar point that you make, right? He takes the straw man argument that says, people say that Trump helped me during the pandemic. He gave us a check, right? The kind of stimulus check. Obama says, well, so did Biden, but also, we didn't take credit for it, right? It was just kind of the thing that we do to take care of our people. But there are still people who think that way, and Obama's trying to kind of cut that difference. So he's been a really effective surrogate. But I have a question for you in terms of surrogates, and that is, where's Joe Biden?
Right.
He's still president, right?
Absolutely,
and,
100%.
Is he not an effective surrogate? Is he just a kind of, appendage that you want to forget about? What do you make of this?
I don't think that the president is an effective surrogate. The moment that you bring, he has done some especially introductions for Vice President Harris here and there. But I think that the Democrats is the right strategy.
Yeah.
Just keep him doing his job and letting him his presidency, end of story.
Yeah.
The moment that you bring Joe Biden to the public, the Trump campaign are going to be, thank you, and are just going to go right into it. And they're very, very good. And the fact that Joe Biden, we've seen it in all these polls.
Yeah.
When Joe Biden step aside, Democrats increase their numbers.
Yeah.
If you bring it out, it's not a good it's not a good strategy at this stage of the campaign.
It feels like you're going backwards. Yeah, I mean, and Biden's approval ratings are like sub 40, like in the high 30s, which is not great. But obviously, too, that's not a kind of effective use of a public sense. But as a Democrat, he could be very useful. Now, remember, he's from Scranton. He's from Pennsylvania. This is a sort of connection that he's got. There are also stories that, kind of Democratic Catholics aren't is connected to the party anymore because they don't have that kind of same relationship. So, there's a kind of working class vibe that, to be honest, the Democrats have really either neglected or forgotten about that could be very important in a lot of these blue wall states that she needs to win, but maybe even Texas.
Maybe more as a backdoor operative than facing the public and facing the cameras.
He's been doing a little of this, right? Kind of smaller rallies and just events and things.
Yeah, and I think talking to the right people, in Scranton or Pennsylvania, I think that it can have a more significant impact than going to this big rally. And
he's not a great rally speaker.
I don't think so.
One-on-one, he's good. In contrast to, say, Elon Musk giving you $1 million to sign a pledge,
jumping into the stage and Red Bull energy all over the place. Yeah, it's
right. Yeah, but Biden can do that in a smaller feature.
I think so.
It can really work. But this week he did make a bit of a gaffe, as Biden is prone to do. He suggested, in referencing this shock comedian that talked about Puerto Rico, that he saw that kind of a problem about this was that that the only thing was garbage about this was the kind of supporters of Trump. And Biden clarified by saying he wasn't talking about their supporters writ large, rather these supporters who are making these terrible comments. But still, you're right. It's a kind of Hillary Clinton basket of deplorables, kind of an awkward way to, kind of slap with the back of your hand all these people who otherwise, would potentially in other situations be Democratic supporters, right? The erosion of the working class vote for Democrats has been steady but significant, and that's a problem for them in terms of getting that coalition.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk Texas. The U.S. Senate race is the most expensive in Texas history, more than $166 million being raised by Cruz and Allred. That's an insane amount of money for any cycle, but least of all one where you're spending billions on the presidential race. Okay, give me your best closing argument here for Colin Allred.
It's 3.4, 3.5 difference. Anything could happen.
Anything can happen.
But once again, turnout in big urban areas. So I think Allred needs to really throw all the meat to the plate. Just throw everything. Like don't even think about it. Just get the bucket, throw it, and see what sticks. And what sticks, great. What doesn't stick doesn't really matter.
Move on to the next town.
Exactly. Exactly. And really pump turnout, right? Really pump turnout in these key areas are going to be the Texas Triangle. And just focus in those areas. And eventually hope that turnout is going to pick up for him. And it could happen, right? It could happen in the sense of having a split ballot. People voting for Trump and then voting for Allred, or the other way around.
I'm surprised they haven't made that more an expressed kind of argument, right? That say that you can vote for Trump and for me. That's a world that makes sense in this way. because Ted Cruz is sort of uniquely unpopular. I think you're right. We haven't seen that much, but that kind of negates your ability to kind of have a strong argument that Democrats are, really effective at being Democrats, right? But I do think that Allred has to pursue that coalition, right? He's got to get the coalition of Black and Latino, especially men, on his side. That is a challenge, and it's been a problem for the party because the numbers have been drifting in a bad way for them. So they've got to get those numbers back. I think they will, but as a long-term trend, it could be problematic for them.
I mean, yes and no. Because the gender gap...
Focus on the yes part, the part you agree with me on. That's the part I like.
I never agree with you. You're always wrong. The turnout gap is important.
Yeah.
And women, especially when you're thinking about the Latino community, women are more likely to go out and vote. So if men are not turning out to vote, it's... okay, sure.
Yeah.
At the end is those numbers.
Yeah.
And
they take that split.
Exactly.
Even despite the fact that they're losing ground among a kind of poor coalition.
Right.
Okay.
And the same thing happens with African Americans. So if you're losing them, sure. The question is, if you're losing them and then they're turning out to vote for Cruz, then you have a problem.
Right. Which I'm not sure they will, right? It's probably a non-voting situation. So that's my guess. Well, let's talk about Cruz, because obviously he's got a big task ahead of him too. He's been complaining about not enough money being spent on his race. His friends sort of came to his aid, Mitch McConnell, spending a lot of money, especially on issues about transgender politics. Do you think it's going to work?
We're going to find out.
Yeah, okay.
Obviously.
Very good. I need answers.
I mean, it's kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little too late on the one hand. And also, transgender issues, it's a very delicate political issue.
Yeah.
It's very polarizing, number one.
So the time to handle it is during an election year where everyone's very sensitive to all the issues.
So it's very polarizing. And it has much more deep implications, especially for families of transgender kids and so on. Then they put into transgenders participating in sports. That's also a complicated issue. I think there's perhaps more consensus on that. But then you revert back to the real substance of the issue, right? And the real substance of the issue, I think that Cruz has not handled it well.
Right. He may not have to, though, right? Because it's just a motivator for the base, right? That plus the GOP in Texas is sending out mailers that suggest that Colin Allred backs reparations for slavery. He says this is not true. They say the CDC, or the Congressional Black Caucus, is advancing these notions. So, again, it's a kind of extremism that they're trying to label on Colin Allred. I don't think it's really working. I mean, he's been really disciplined about his message,
absolutely.
and I think he's got enough money that he can basically spend his way to making the case that he is a moderate.
Yeah.
And I think you're right that, like, for Cruz, it's a base turnout election. He's got to get rural voters in particular. So, like, this works for that, right?
Yeah.
That's what he needs.
Yeah.
We'll see how that plays out, but that's going to be a marquee race. But that's not the only one, Jeronimo. Lots of things happening all the way down ballot. Let's talk about Fort Bend County. We've talked about this before, but Tarel Patel is the Democratic nominee for Fort Bend Precinct number 3 in the County Commissioner's Court. He had previously worked as the Chief of Staff for KP George. He was arrested this summer after authorities said that he used fake social media accounts to post racist comments under his own page. He's facing 4 felony counts. He's facing a handful of misdemeanor counts, but he's still running for office.
Yep.
Is this going to be a liability for him? If you drive around Fort Bend County, as I know you do because you live out there, like, you see his ad, his signs, and then you see right next to it like mugshot of him, right? So people are out there reminding them, the voters, about this, but I don't know if it'll matter.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
And it's going to be something that we're going to find out, of course.
Of course.
But it's a very interesting phenomenon, because you have had Democrats at the county level saying, like, you should step away a couple of months ago. Obviously, right now it's too late.
Yeah.
But that's going to be important. And if he wins...
It's pretty telling,
Yeah,
it's almost like, what? Like, how? But it's all about just partisan rigidity, right?
Exactly.
And there's a good chance that it could still work. But let's talk about partisanship beyond that. In the
Okay.
last few minutes here, let's talk about the Texas House. The Republicans hold an 86 to 63 vote margin. Greg Abbott thinks that the Republicans can flip about 3. Trey Martinez-Fisher, who's the Democratic caucus chair, says they can flip 7. I think the number's more like maybe 2 for the Democrats, but what do you think? Which districts are, you think, the ones that are most vulnerable to flip?
Well, there's a couple. There you have 118 in San Antonio is very interesting.
Spending millions of dollars on that race.
Millions.
Yeah.
And
John Lujan is the incumbent. That could
John
be very
Lujan is
tough.
the incumbent, and all the end of the matter is regarding school vouchers.
Yeah.
And you have a very interesting race in the sense of how this is going to turn out. Carranza, the contender, is just advocating for funding public schools. And
Yeah, and that became a race about abortion very quickly
Yep.
too, right? Lujan said he would basically make his daughter, if she was hypothetically raped, to carry the baby to term. That didn't sit well with Carranza and well as kind of Democratic voters. It's also a question about whether working class voters are still going to be in the Democrats' coalition. I want to talk about North Texas because there are some races in the Dallas County and in Collin County, where I'm from, that definitely are in play. Morgan Meyer is in a tough fight. Angie Chen Button is in a tough fight against Avery Bishop, who is the former Miss Texas. They're spending a lot of money on that race, and whether Democrats come out in that would be very telling. Democrats hold the seat in House District 70 in Collin County. Palesa is the incumbent, and that's going to be a telling story about whether or not the state's changing fast enough that it's going to have some coalition differences and some demographic changes that will benefit Democrats.
And in that note,
Wow, so much going on. We could do this forever.
we're gonna find out what happens. But remember, we have to be patient on election night. We have to be patient with the results. Not everything is gonna be as we are used to it on election night. We may or may not know who is the winner. It's gonna take time.
So true.
And that doesn't mean that anything nefarious is happening. It's just gonna take time.
Just be patient,
And
yeah.
on that note, I'm Jeronimo Cortina.
And I'm Brandon Rottinghaus. The conversation and the election keeps up next week.